New technology is giving law enforcement new tools to fight crime and terrorism. But there are critics who say it's coming at the expense of your privacy and that there's a troubling potential for abuse. CNN's Brian Todd is looking into it for us. Brian, what are you finding out?
Candy, we're learning that more of us are being surveilled than ever before and that our local police are now able to get that information and process it at unprecedented speed. On the streets of Memphis, a futuristic crime-fighting tool. Squad cars equipped with license plate recognition cameras. Turning on swivels, they scan plates. The images processed on laptops inside the police cars and in what's called a real-time crime center. In seconds, a display on his dashboard screen tells an officer if the car's been stolen, if there are warrants connected to it, maybe if the driver's a convicted felon. Surveillance cameras with real-time transmission back to the crime center are popping up all over Memphis. This Memphis Police Department video proudly promotes these new tools, and they're credited with a drastic crime drop in Memphis in recent years. Some of the money for this whiz-bang comes from the Department of Homeland Security.
DHS has helped them with the funding in the hopes that someday they will be using this also to, again, look for possible terrorism.
Dana Priest co-wrote a lengthy investigative story for the Washington Post on new high-tech tools and data sharing used by Homeland Security and law enforcement. According to the article, more information is being collected on many of us and shared among more law enforcement agencies than ever before. It's part of an often heard post-9/11 mantra to catch potential terrorists.
To help the federal government find the dots, to find people who might be acting suspiciously.
The information goes to so-called fusion centers run by state and local law enforcement. That's where data on suspicious behavior is shared with DHS, the FBI, and other agencies. With an uptick in terror plots in recent years, a DHS official says this system has led to more arrests. But privacy advocates say it also carries huge potential for abuse. Former FBI agent Michael German, now with the American Civil Liberties Union, says it empowers police to intervene more deeply into people's private lives.
The behaviors they have described as inherently suspicious include things like taking notes, drawing diagrams, taking measurements, taking photographs or video, which are ubiquitous activities that all of us do.
But terrorists also do that, right?
I'm sure they do, but terrorists also put shoes on. But that doesn't mean that somehow tracking every person who puts shoes on or every person who takes notes or every person who takes photographs is somehow a useful practice.
Michael German says previous investigations have found that in some cases, law enforcement officials used technology and shared information to look at the private information of celebrities. Contacted by CNN, officials from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security said they have strong programs in place to combat potential abuse and that unnecessary information is not added to any of these databases or kept in them. Candy?
Brian, is there any policy in place that would teach agents about protecting privacy?
Well, both agencies say they not only train their agents on those protections, but they're very clear on punishments that they'll incur if those protections are broken, and they do privacy impact assessments when they first get some of this information to make sure that it doesn't infringe on someone's privacy. If it's unnecessary or if it does so unnecessarily, it won't go into those databases.
Brian Todd, thanks so much for that. We want to talk a little more about this story with CNN national security contributor Fran Townsend. She was Homeland Security Advisor to President George W. Bush and is a member of the Homeland Security External Advisory Board. Fran, every time another of these stories come out about, okay, now they can do this and they can do that, and not only can they are doing it, I have to ask, do you ever fear that we have gone too far?
You know, Candy, I mean, the really important thing, yes, you worry about going too far, but the most important thing is how much of this information are they retaining, and of what they're retaining, what are they doing with it? How long do they hold it? How do they protect it? All the questions that you talked to Brian about. You know, they scan license plates. They don't keep all that data. They couldn't possibly. And so what I think is important, you know, President Obama recently made 2 appointments to the President's Privacy and Civil Liberties Board. That's the sort of thing that I think that the privacy community and everyday Americans want to be sure that there's somebody looking at these programs, answering the questions we're asking. Is it necessary? Is there oversight and is there training?
But somehow it occurs to me that this gets down to the individuals who are using the systems, the agents, the people that are looking at the information as it comes in. It's the same thing with the TSA. We are asked to trust that the people who are doing this are not keeping it because, you know, they think it's interesting or, you know, for any reason whatsoever. And that's a pretty big leap of faith given what technology now allows the federal government and the local governments to do.
Candy, I agree with you completely. And while Brian talked about there are training programs at the federal level, the sorts of things I'm familiar with, you know, the resources are tighter at the state and local level. And so I've always worried about, is there the same sort of training on privacy protections at the state and local level? Look, I think that this is an area that people ought to rightly be concerned about. But I think the government can do a whole lot by being transparent about what its rules and procedures are, and having outsiders on a bipartisan basis look at these programs, be able to talk to the American people, and have congressional oversight. You know, why aren't the committees asking these questions in public?
Let me turn you just quickly to, there have been some arrests in London, alleged terrorist plot going on. All we've heard for the last 2 weeks about increased chatter. There's increased chatter. Can you please explain to the American people and to me what exactly that means and how worried we should be about increased chatter about terrorist plots?
You know, Candy, it's funny because this increased chatter, as you know, often happens around the holidays, and we don't pay much attention to it. I mean, you've always got to watch.
Because wouldn't they know it would freak us out to have increased chatter?
Yes, but let me tell you why I think this year is a little different. You know, going back to late spring, early summer, American officials started talking about the threat coming in from Europe. We saw actions taken by German authorities, French authorities, around the world, and the Saudis and the Yemenis. We've seen an increase in activity. I don't think it's just chatter this year. It seems to be based on intelligence, which is more concerning. That said, it looks like across the board with our allies, all these intelligence and law enforcement communities are taking additional steps and are on a much higher alert than they were last year when we saw the Christmas Day attempt.
And that's good news. National Security Contributor Fran Townsend, thank you so much.
Thanks.